Alrighty, folks. This was a little bit unplanned. If anybody is actually here live, please put something in the chat box. Tell me that the microphone is working. I just got home, just got off the airplane a little bit earlier today. Well, not much earlier, a couple hours. I spent a week in Florida, then I went to Los Angeles. A friend of mine, interestingly, my email is informing me that Dark Lord of Optics started the DLO live stream. But anyhow, from Florida, I went over to Los Angeles to celebrate a good friend of mine's 50th birthday. And as we were celebrating that quite vigorously last night, they threw a hell of a party. Like 100 people, 90 people, something significant. I looked at the news and realized that the Assad regime in Syria has fallen. Since then, I've kind of glanced a little bit on X and a few other places to see what the general reaction is like. And one thing that has become relatively apparent is that too many people are making too many assumptions based on too little knowledge. Oh, hey, Jared. Good to see you, sir. So, Jared says, not a surprise, but perhaps not a great thing for the region. So if you have any insight into it, I'm very curious about it. It is probably a good thing short term. We don't know if it's necessarily a good thing long term. That's the sort of an interesting situation with Syria, and we tend to. The way media covers it, the forces of the rebels have, overthrown the despotic regime of Bashar al-Assad, and it sounds like that these are, Hollywood-style honorable freedom fighters who are overthrowing a despotic, tyrannical regime. Well, the second part is true, right? So it was a despotic, tyrannical regime, but the first part. Not so much, because nobody there exactly is a peach. And the Assad regime was overthrown by essentially Islamist terrorists. So there aren't really any real good guys in that conflict. Well, almost no good guys in that conflict. There are a couple of people there that are interesting. And what I thought I'd do, I'd talk a little bit about it and see if you guys have any questions on this. Please put them in the chat box. And in the meantime, I'm going to pop up a map from a place called the ISW, Institute of Study of War. They have amazing maps that I really like, and I'm going to see if I can pop one in relatively large on the screen and talk a little bit about who is on the ground there, who the larger factions. Again, I don't know all the factions. There's too many of them. But we don't know a little bit, and that might be worth discussing. So, as a general comment, I wanted to talk about Damascus and business in Syria for a few minutes. I'll be happy to take any other questions on scopes, optics, rifles, shot show. I've been asking questions about what you guys want me to look at shot show. I don't have a huge amount of time, so I'll talk about Syria for 15 minutes or so. And if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to take them. Here we go. So this is from Institute of Study of War. That shows the spheres of influence, the way they are right now. All of that is very fluid, changes all the time, but it gives you a rough idea of where we are. Let me see. I want to see if you guys are able to see my mouse or not. It's not entirely clear. All right. So, first of all, the downfall of Middle Eastern dictators, Shah in Iran, Gaddafi in Libya, Hussein in Iraq, Assad in Syria has and will only lead to instability. Yeah. The big question is that was there going to be stability there as is, and how long? That's the kind of fun things. With Gaddafi, I'm generally with you, but Gaddafi was getting older. It was not clear who was the successor. The Shah in Iran, it definitely turned out badly. That was a Carter screw up. But by the standard of the modern Islamist or left-leaning dictators, the Shah was a peach. Although Lord knows he was well, the Shah was an interesting ruler. With Saddam Hussein in Iraq, that's a little bit different. Israel is the only country in the region that is a competent democracy. That is true, but no other country that has really tried democracy or honestly is capable of it just yet. One of the big problems that with American policy in the region has been with this attempt at nation building. And you can't really build nations where there is no national identity. That's one of the things that I wanted to discuss a little bit. The Syria as a country, the way we know it today, is a legacy of a post-World War One reshuffling of the world order. It was what was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Basically, Ottoman Empire fell apart, and France and Britain primarily carved out a bunch of countries in the Middle East, and eventually they kind of let them be. And Syria and Lebanon were French, right? A Palestinian mandate where Israel and Jordan are right now, and Iraq that was dominated by Great Britain. So when Syria in its present shape was carved out, it was basically a new country was created. The area called Syria has existed for a long time, but this is not what it looked like. And in Syria, a bunch of different ethnic, religious, cultural, etc., groups that don't necessarily like each other very much have been shoved together into a completely untenable state. So, forgetting Lebanon for a moment, if you look at Syria, so what we have there right now, originally the Assad family were, when they came into power, they were part of the Ba'ath Party, which is kind of a Mr. Master Shredder. Hello, sir. When the Assad family originally came to power, what was it, 1971, I want to say? Something like that. It was a military junta for practical purposes, with the elder Assad becoming the leader for life. And Ba'ath Party was this proto-socialist leaning secular Arab movement. Saddam Hussein was part of Ba'ath Party. Mr. Master Shredder is in Ohio, it seems. All right. So Ba'ath Party was Saddam Hussein in Iraq was Ba'ath Party, and Assad family in Syria was Ba'ath as well. But ethnically, culturally, religiously, etc., the Assad family was representative of the Alawite sect, which is comparatively small. I don't remember for sure what portion of Syria it is, but it's somewhere in a 6 to 10% range by population. And their stronghold is this area, and you can see it where it says Tartus and Latakia by the Mediterranean. This is kind of a Alawite area. They traditionally are pretty nicely concentrated in an area by the ocean. The majority of Syria, as I remember, was Sunni, but was a significant Shiite influence as well, coming in from the general direction of Iran in Iraq. And then there were the Christian and the Druze. I think Christians are 5 to 10%, used to be a little bit more, 5 to 10% of the Syrian population. Druze are technically an offshoot of Islam, but they're very, very different. Druze are there as well. Druze, not Jews, Druze. With my accent, you can confuse me. There are not a lot of Jews in Syria, unless they're flying on top as part of Israeli Air Force. But anyhow, Druze is Druze. It's another religion over there, and there are small smatterings of Baha'i and God knows what else. So the Assad clan was Alawites. They ended up being in charge, supported by a variety of assholes from all over the world, primarily by the Soviet Union, and then more recently by Iran and Russia. And they stayed in power, well, since, what's it, 1971, I want to say, until now, for the two Assad rulers. Hafez was the father, and Bashar was the son who just got kicked out. The Assad rule in Syria was, well, more or less what any strongman in the Middle East, ruling in the Middle East, would look like: a reasonable amount of bloodbath, brutal suppression of their political enemies. That's actually an interesting question. Would the Middle East be better if it returned to the Ottoman Empire time period? Yeah, actually, a really good question. Probably not. So let me finish a little bit with the historical interlude. And with what's happening now, we can talk about the Ottoman Empire. Yeah. And in the traditional Middle Eastern tradition, there was no real economic development, some oil and gas and stuff like that. And other than that, the Assad family treated Syria as their fiefdom, brutally suppressed and imprisoned anybody who didn't like them, and a lot of people who didn't overtly like them. None of that was particularly good. After the fall of Iraq and the rise of all the various Islamist movements like ISIS and others, there were significant attempts to overthrow the Assad, and like many people, a lot of us were sitting there thinking, okay, so if Assad is gone, an asshole that he is, would it be any better if ISIS or some truly fundamentalist Islamic movement replaces them? And the solution was that probably not. So the conflicts in Syria for the last quite a few years now have always been, are there any really good guys over there? Assad stayed in power with help from Russia and with Iran, so Russian troops. Oftentimes, those Russian mercenaries were there, so that Russia would have semi-plausible deniability, but everybody knows they're just Russian troops. And the Wagner Group is what I'm talking about. The Russians showed up in Syria. They were so savage and bloodthirsty that even the local Arabs were impressed. That was kind of interesting. Somehow Assad stayed in power, but was relatively tenuous. And what happened was that when ISIS was defeated, some shreds of ISIS and Al Qaeda affiliated groups retreated to the Idlib province on the border with Turkey, which is what you see in the darkish gray and a kind of a left a little bit top of this map. Then what is here in purple, that's the area where the Kurds live. So Kurds are relatively numerous people in the Middle East who are always trying to fight for their own state and always getting shafted, betrayed by us and everybody else, but they are sort of supported by United States to some degree. We have a couple of bases there. So we support them just enough that they're not exterminated, but not enough for them to have their own country. It's kind of an interesting thing of U.S. foreign policy under Obama and Biden. Make all sorts of promises and then slow walk everything. That's what Biden has been doing with Ukraine and with Israel and with the Kurds. Nobody talks about the Kurds, but that's been largely the same thing. Up on top in yellow is another group called SNA, Syrian National Army. And that is relatively fundamentalist Sunni groups that are primarily supported by Turkey because Turkey has a big border with Syria and they are interested. And Turkey has probably the biggest thing on the two biggest thing on Turkish mind for Erdogan. One, he wants Turkey to be the leader of Muslim life in the Middle East. And also, it's very important for Turks to make sure that Kurds never have their own state. Turkey will not allow a Kurdish state next to their borders if they have any say in it at all, because Kurds are split between Turkey, lots of them in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and a little bit in Iran, and they want their own state, and nobody has been itching to let them create one. Within Iraq, they are sort of operating in a semi-autonomous area. And in Syria, if you look at it, that part of Syria also is sort of like controlled by the Kurds, but still they don't have their own state. Okay. So that's roughly where we are. So what happened? The group called HTS, something something El Sham. These are basically remnants of Al Qaeda and ISIS. Since then, they've announced that they got nicer and they're no longer Al Qaeda and ISIS, but they're still fundamentalist Islamist terrorists. There is it's a U.S. designated terrorist group. The leader there, who is trying to be civilized now, who is a bounty on his head. They utilized, with fairly good timing, so that the Syrian regime is weak, and they spilled out of the Idlib province where they were, took Aleppo, then went toward Damascus, took Hama, Homs, and finally took Damascus last night. And Assad's family, I think, has been in London for a while now. Assad himself got on a plane and bailed out. So there are rumors that the plane was shut down, or that it crashed, or that they turned off their transponder and went somewhere. We don't know. Until somebody relatively credible tells us what exactly happened, nobody knows. Okay. What's going to happen next is really interesting, right? So the group in control of Damascus is this HTS, and they think they are going to rule Syria, and they're basically saying that they are going to be nice to minorities and all that are no longer ISIS, Al Qaeda, and they're not going to be killing the infidels. Doesn't seem like anybody believes them, but the proof is in the pudding. They're going to try to rule. But it's not going to be so simple, because there is the Syrian National Army backed by Turkey. Turkey has an interest, and they have the means to support theirs. While all of this is happening, Turkey, SNA, basically went and attacked SDF, which is the Kurds, right? So Turkey always wants to go after the Kurds. Something about between Turks and Kurds that's really interesting there. The Druze and the Christians are more or less trying to not get killed by the much larger Islamist parties. As far as the Shiite Muslims go, that's more Hezbollah, but Hezbollah has been very severely weakened because they decided to pick a fight with Israel. Since Hamas attacked Israel, Israel first relatively systematically went after Gaza and now went after Hezbollah. And because Hezbollah was so diminished and Iran was to a significant degree diminished, the Syrian regime fell. Russia is distracted in Ukraine. Iran got its ass handed to it by Israel. Hezbollah is not really a particularly potent fighting force anymore. Hamas has been largely decimated. So Iran has gotten a lot weaker, and Iran and Russia were supporting the Syrian regime. Okay, all right. So Assad family is no longer in power and probably won't be. What is going to happen next? And the truth is, nobody knows. All the major powers around are sort of taking a wait and see approach. The two powers who are very close to it, Turkey and Israel, are protecting their interest a little bit. Israelis, and you can see there is a very small blue area. There's Mount Hermon. It's the largest mountain there in Golan Heights. Golan Heights are mostly in Israel, and part of it is in Syria. I think there's a better map here. I'm gonna. It shows there's a close up here. There you go. So that's a close up. So this is Golan Heights. There's Mount Hermon here. It's kind of the tallest thing. On top of it was a Syrian base. Israelis basically said, okay, we don't like what's going to happen here. They moved in a little bit and moved in their military to control the tallest point in the area, and also to protect some United Nations peacekeepers from the local terrorists, which is kind of interesting, since United Nations peacekeepers, for the most part, have been preoccupied by accusing Israel of all possible mortal sins. But anyhow, be that as it may, Israel has created a little bit of a buffer for themselves and is controlling the highest natural point in the area. And beyond that, the only thing Israel is doing, they have a pretty good idea where Assad has stored the various chemical weapons that he has from Russia and Iran. And they've been strategically exploding those, probably correctly assuming that if any of the Islamist groups in the area get their hands on chemical weapons, that might not turn out so well for us. Okay. On the other side of this, Turkey, as I mentioned earlier, with the groups they support called SNA, Syrian National Army, are getting in there. But so far, most of what they're doing is trying to make sure the Kurds don't get a state of their own. But between the Syrian National Army, supported by Turkey, SDF, which is Kurdish, sort of defense forces, and HTS, which is this former Al Qaeda, former ISIS Islamists who claim that they've gotten civilized and they're the ones who took over Syria. These are probably the three most powerful groups around there. And none of them like each other very much. And if I were a betting man, I'd say they will find a way to go after each other before too long. And then none of these have any real access to the water, to the Mediterranean, because between them and the Mediterranean is the area that is sort of controlled by Alawites, which was the clan that Assad family was originally from. And there, when you'll see the start of Latakia. Over here, Russia also has a couple of bases, an Air Force base and a Navy base. Russians are not itching to leave. There were a lot of rumors that Russians are packing up and leaving. Not so sure I believe that for now, but maybe. The basic problem for Russia is that so if they take their navy out of Tartus, out of Syria, where the hell is it going to go? It can't go back into the Black Sea. Turkey controls the Bosphorus, won't let them in. It's not clear if they can make it into the Baltic Sea, because there's kind of NATO in the way there. That might not go around so well. They can try to make it all the way around the ocean toward the far east part of Russia, a place called Vladivostok. It's a major navy center. But Russian navy is not in such a good shape, and it's not a given that it can sail that far without sinking. So there are complications there. And while Russia is very distracted and in Ukraine and cannot did not have the resources to keep Assad in power, they might be able to have enough resources to keep this Alawite area in Alawite hands. So what's going to happen next? Nobody knows. We might be seeing at a breakup of Syria, like happened in Yugoslavia, into several different countries, essentially. But then nobody knows what the borders are going to look like. But for example, Israel, I'm sure, would be quite happy to have a Druze country bordering them at the Golan Heights. That the Druze are much better neighbors than pretty much everybody else in there. The Christians in Syria mostly concentrated on two, three major cities, and no matter who ends up in power, no matter which Islamic group ends up in power, nothing good's going to happen for the Christians. There is a rumor out there that Assad was busy protecting Christians in Syria. Yeah, not so much. Lots of Christians supported Assad, but as far as persecutions and putting people in jail and killing them, etc., Assad did not particularly discriminate against different religions. But either way, Christians did not have other than in Israel, Christians did not have a particularly good outlook in the Middle East before this, and they don't have a particularly good outlook in the Middle East now. Right? If there is a area controlled by the Druze over there, that would be relatively comfortable for Christians. Druze don't generally go after the other religions very much. But short of that, yeah, Christians in the Middle East are kind of screwed. The big unknown is, of course, how hard Turkey is going to push in there. They And I'm getting to JR of Chicago's comment about Middle East. Would it be better if it returned to the Ottoman Empire? So Turkey has these visions of rebuilding some parts of Ottoman Empire. This whole area used to be part of the Ottoman Empire, but the empire was kind of crumbling at the seams. And as a result of World War II, it all fell apart. Probably would not be better if it was Ottoman Empire again. Empire building is not something that is super viable in the modern world. And the idea of a national self-determination to some degree has sort of taken hold. If we try to return to the Ottoman Empire, that would mean Israel would not exist again. That ain't happening, right? And Turkey, while they want to be in control or the leader of the Muslim world, I'm not so sure they want to have much of anything to do with the clusterfuck that is Lebanon or quite a few others over there. In general, the whole Muslim world business, there is this three-party competition over there. So there's between the Saudis, Iran, Iranian regime, whichever way you want to think about it, and Turkey, but who is going to be leading the Islamic world? And Iran right now is not doing so well because they decided to pick a direct confrontation with Israel, and it turned out that they it's a good way of saying this that they sort of overestimated their own capabilities more than a little. So with Iran, the big question right now is that how weakened really is the Iranian regime right now, and what are the chances of that being overthrown within some relatively near future? And that is a question to which nobody has an answer. So I've been brewing more tea. Every time I come off the plane, I'm spectacularly dehydrated, so green tea is what gets me moving. So we don't know what's going to happen with Iran. Iranians have tried to overthrow the Iranian Islamic Republic regime a couple of times here and there. Unfortunately, the timing is bad. They tend to do it when either Obama Biden is in power, so they get no help. If they give it another shot when Trump is in power, would they get more help? Possibly. The basic problem with Trump is that he says a lot of things. I don't know which one of them he's actually going to do. Right. So we'll see. But the big takeaway here is that, yeah, this is some additional instability, but it's not like we had stability before. There was all sorts of crap happening anyway. This is just a little bit more visible than normal, but that's pretty much it. Middle East is a keg. Is it a good development overall? In the short term, it weakens Iran substantially. So that's probably not a bad thing. A lot of the funding of different terrorists out there has been at the hands of Iran or Iranian Islamic Republic. If you wish, most people in Iran don't want to have anything to do with this bullshit, from what I can tell. But Iran getting weaker is generally a pretty good thing. But it doesn't mean that the replacement to Iranian influence in the area is going to be anybody good, right? The current leader of Turkey, Erdogan, he is a creature of Muslim Brotherhood by all accounts, which is a fundamentalist Salafi Sunni Muslim movement that's not really any better. Again, not a lot of good guys in Syria right now. For Israel, it probably gives them a little bit more ability to wrap up the business with Hezbollah, but then they still need to figure out what's going to happen in South Lebanon. Israel doesn't really want to have anything to do with it, but they do not want another group, whether it's Hezbollah or somebody else, of fanatical, aggressive Islamist fundamentalists to move into the area, whether on the Lebanese side or on the Syrian side. So they need to figure out how to deal with that. In terms of stabilizing the area, honestly, I think Syria for a little while is going to be a lost cause. I think the three primary groups over there, HTS, SNA, and SDF, are all going to be going at it for the foreseeable future. And as long as we don't support any one of them excessively, they'll keep each other busy for a good amount of time. It's not ideal, people are going to die, but if peace is not an option, then some sort of a relatively even confrontation between groups we don't especially like might be it. Although SDF is Kurdish group, which is comparatively sane by the standards of the area. What's going to happen with Lebanon is a more interesting question, because if another stable state were to emerge there, if Hezbollah is properly suppressed, and it sounds like it's getting there, Lebanon does have some sort of a chance to become a relatively stable country, beautiful place, can easily be essentially Singapore and then some of the Middle East. Beautiful, nice beaches right on the Mediterranean, mountains, a spectacular place. And if Hezbollah is kicked out and Israel manages to prevent some Islamist fanatics from moving in, given that, and if United Arab Emirates and Saudis make a reasonable investment in rebuilding the area and civilizing it a little bit, Lebanon probably has a chance. Probably has a chance of stabilizing. So Syria, for the foreseeable future, I don't see anything worthwhile happening there. It's going to be some form of chaos. Israelis are going to be preoccupied with making sure that chaos doesn't spill over their borders. And if the world powers decide to focus on building some sort of a stable country out there, Lebanon would be, to me, would be the more logical option. Jared. Countries in the Middle East need a strong hand. Introducing democracy with the Gulf Wars was a well-intentioned but short-sighted plan. Very much so, right? So when we went into Iraq, overthrew Saddam Hussein, I was all for it. It was a good thing. Saddam Hussein was getting old, senile, and couldn't quite understand what's what. But trying to build democracy there was nuts. It's a tribal clan society. You cannot do democracy there. When we went in there, we should have had a candidate to replace Saddam, to be basically less brutal dictator who could sit there, keep relative quiet, and not go counter to our interests. If Lebanon is to be a stable country, I don't know if it can truly be a fully functional democracy. But it is small enough and mixed enough, because Lebanon has a significant number of Christians, Maronite Christians, and Druze, and Sunni Muslim, and Shiites. As long as the fanatics cannot quite get in power, Lebanon probably has a chance. Can it be a truly functioning democracy? Probably, maybe not anytime soon. But we'll see. Jared, Christians believe that all nations will combine and attempt to destroy Israel. I assume that's about Syria. It is possible, but it is not likely. After the exercise that Israel just did on Hamas and Hezbollah, I don't think any of those assholes are itching to pick a fight with Israel in a short term. Long term, yes. Short term, probably not. Once again, I could be wrong. It is very commonly underestimated how much different groups in the area over in Syria and the Middle East truly hate each other. And balance that they probably hate Israel more, but they really hate each other quite a bit. And Israel is the overwhelming military power in the region, with Saudis and UAE. Yeah, see. Oh, that's a good one. Saudis and UAE and others get out of the business of sponsoring terrorists, and they are well on their way there, then um, I have a suspicion that the groups that are in Syria are going to try to become the dominant power there before they go after anybody else. And the way they are positioned right now, I don't think any one of them has the ability to be the dominant power. Jared, not hard to foresee if the UN leads forces against Israel to end the apartheid state. No, UN talks a lot. They will not lead anybody's forces anywhere. UN does not have the ability to lead anyone or really to exercise power in any sort of a meaningful way. They talk a big game, but for the most part, yeah. Israel had to walk into border into Syria to protect UN troops from some local thugs. Okay, they couldn't even handle that. Trying for United Nations with any Muslim terrorists' help, trying to take over true first world military like Israel would be very difficult. Israel, to conquer the whole territory, you need a lot of people, which Israel does not have. But to protect your own territory, you need the will, you need some number of people, you need absolute technological superiority. And Israel does have that. It is a grossly misunderstood point. Israel is not really looking for any sort of expansion. That's actually incorrect, Jared. Israel is not looking for any sort of significant expansion. They just want their neighbors to stop attacking them. That's pretty much it. Jared, you can't blame Israel for wanting to keep their country Jewish, but babies win wars. Population and Jewish Israelis are not reproducing fast enough. Amazingly enough, they're actually reproducing fairly quickly. Um, Israel is the only truly modern nation that is having babies at a higher than replacement rate. So yeah, the many other countries in the Middle East technically are having more babies, but they also don't live as long and they keep on having wars. So in terms of the demographic issues, for a little while at least, Israel is going to remain a Jewish country. But long term, you are right. Long term, the demographics might be an issue, and it's not entirely clear how that is going to be resolved. The only real hope is that by the time demographics become a serious issue, we might find a way to have some sort of stability in the Middle East. And to be fair, Saudis and UAE and Bahrain and others are looking into that. An interesting angle is that as United States, at least militarily, is making moves to disengage from the world, Middle East included, at least to a good degree, within this competition between different Muslim powers, Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. But if Iran collapses, it's just going to be Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Saudis are going to be looking for somebody else to be their technologically advanced military ally. And Israel, for that, is probably the most natural choice if Americans mostly disengage and just willing to provide some weaponry. So I'm not super worried about the demographic bomb. I am very curious what's going to happen there and how Lebanon is going to be rebuilt. Right, a big part of why Assad was able to stay in power is that Hezbollah from Lebanon and Syria was able to support him because they are supported by Iran. That is not happening anymore, and Hezbollah is losing power in Lebanon as well. Can Lebanon be restored and rebuilt into a viable country on the Middle Eastern shores? If the answer to that is yes, that may be the first seed for some measure of stability in the Middle East. And then, if it can be rebuilt, who is going to be doing it? If Lebanon falls under Turkish influence, that's trouble for Israel, probably trouble for U.S. interests. If Lebanon is rebuilt under the influence from United Arab Emirates and the Saudis, then that might be a bad thing for Turkey. Probably on balance, at least long term. It'll take some time to get the short term working. long term, it might be a good thing for Israel. So at least that's how I see it. That's, I think, how it is shaking out. And if you are looking at this carefully, I strongly recommend going to this ISW, understandingwar.org. They have the most amazing maps. If you want a visual of what's happening there, they update them on a daily basis, which is extremely, extremely useful, at least for me. And beyond that, all I can suggest really is not to make too many assumptions. Basically, the Syria, country formerly known as Syria, is full of well-armed assholes who all hate each other. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We simply do not know. But anyhow, that sort of wraps up the business on Syria. I just wanted to bring a little bit of a dose of reality. There are no good guys in Syria, right? And with Assad out of the picture, one of the bad guys is gone, but it doesn't mean the other bad guys have become good. They haven't. It is a wait and see situation. So we will wait and see. All righty. I see there are a few people here. If there is any questions on Middle East, Syria, Russia, Ukraine, if you wish, I'm following that relatively closely. Or on guns and optics, I'll be here for a few more minutes. And if there are none, I am going to wrap up for today. I'm only home for 3 days. On Wednesday night, I'm gonna get on a plane again. I need to hop over to Texas. We are going to have a Christmas party of sorts for my day job, which I'm rather looking forward to. I am fortunate in that the people I work with actually like, so I don't mind spending time with them. And I like Christmas, which is kind of interesting. Me being Jewish, but I always enjoy Christmas. It's a festive holiday. There is certain of a spirit of joy in the air that I find rather enjoyable. So that I'm looking forward to. I am gonna try to make it to the range at least once before I go. I've got a bunch of interesting goodies that made it my way while I was traveling, and then off to Texas. Then I'm back for 3 days. I want to do video on handguns when I'm back, and then the middle of the week after next, around 18th, I'm gonna take my kids and head over to Las Vegas for table tennis tournament of all things. After table tennis tournament, I'll hop over to Southern Utah. I want to go visit the guys at Voodoo Rifles. Those are likely the finest 22s I've ever seen, and I would like to see how they make them. They did say that I will not be able to take any pictures in the production area, which is unfortunate, but I am okay just seeing how they do stuff because I've been super impressed with their rifles. I have the 17 HMR, which I think is remarkable. After that, I'll be back home just in time for Christmas. We don't celebrate Christmas, but some of our friends do. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, a couple of questions here. Jared, I wonder if the Russian forces stationed in Syria will be released to fight in Ukraine. Maybe it's not clear. It's not clear if Russia is going to try to maintain their bases in Syria. If yes, then the answer to the question is no. If they decide to just wrap things up and bail out of there, some forces will be able to go and fight in Ukraine. But as I said, getting the Navy out of there will be not straightforward. And in terms of the regular forces, well, there's some in Syria, really not that many. I don't think it's going to change cardinally anything in the war in Ukraine. Mr. Alpine, how would you compare the Delta Striker 3.5 to 21 by 50 to the Mark IV HD 6 to 24 by 52? So the Delta is not a 50mm objective scope. The Delta is a 3.5 to 21 by 44. It's a small objective. And I have not compared it to the Mark IV 6 to 24 because I don't have them. I have looked at it a little bit side by side next to the Mark IV 4.5 to 18 by 52. And on balance, The Delta is probably a better scope. They're similar in weight. Delta is a little bit smaller, has a broader magnification range, and more of an SPR scope in many ways. The Mark IV is a little bit better in low light. I mean, the objective is a little bit better. That helps. And it is a little bit better, a little bit easier to get behind, right? So it's a smaller magnification ratio, and it's a narrow field of view, which helps with the eye box. Delta is a little bit better mechanically, I think, in terms of feel. Although honestly, I like the Mark IV mechanically. It does have a slight amount of slop in the turret, so Delta doesn't really have. And Delta has a lot of adjustment range, which helps. In terms of pure image quality, I think data out resolves the Mark IV slightly, but it's pretty close. So for a hunting scope, if you don't need the low power for you working with a clip-on, I would probably lean to the 4.5 to 18 by 52 Leupold Mark IV HD. I have that scope. I really like it. It's a little bit better in low light and slightly easier to get behind. And the reticle that I have in it, I think is PR1, is also a little bit more visible on low power. On the other hand, if I was looking for a scope for a long range gas gun or something like that, an accurate gas gun where I'm going to be shooting broad range of distances, including fairly far out, I think Delta is a better match there. It's a little bit more compact, works with clip-ons a little bit better, a little bit better setup for long range. The one I have has the DPRC 3 reticle, which gives you also additional options for holds and stuff like that. It's probably more flexible gas gun long range scope. Okay. So, and for that application also, I think the somewhat higher apparent field of view is a useful thing. Delta, I think, is a 23-degree apparent field of view. I have a spreadsheet somewhere here that calculates it for me, and I think I have both scopes in there. So let me take a quick look. Hold on. Alpine says thank you. You're very welcome. I had this thing called the FOV calculator, and I was keeping all sorts of. I have all sorts of calculators I built in Excel for thermals, for field of view, apparent field of view, stuff like that. So, would it be this? No, that's not it. Interesting. I know I had it, but I am not seeing it, which is very, very frustrating. Okay, let's see if it's here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I think the apparent field of view of the Delta Striker 3.5 to 21 is about 23 degrees. And for Leupold Mark IV, it's right around 20, 21 degrees. It doesn't sound like a big difference, but on the same magnification, you are looking at... there we go. I actually properly called the file AFOV calculator. Let me see if I have them here. Okay, there we go. So for the Leupold Mark IV, the apparent field of view is right around 20 degrees. And let me put that thing on the screen since you're here and asking questions. It should be large enough for what I'm looking to do. It's kind of a running tab of a lot of different scopes that I have. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and show you what I mean. Okay. So I was looking up top. This is the apparent field of views of 3 different Mark IV scopes. I don't have all 3 of these. I have these 2. And I spent quite a lot of time with both of them, but more with the 4.5 to 18. and that one has about 20-degree calculated apparent field of view. Scope's easy to get behind, pretty good on low light. Field of view is not super wide. With the delta, I should have, that's the 4.5 to 30. I know I had the 3.5 to 21 here somewhere, but I do not see it. Oh, there we go. I do have it. So that's this. Let's make it bold. So that's a 22, 23 degree high magnification is where you see that the most. 23-degree apparent field of view. So on the same field of view with the delta, on the same magnification with the delta, it'll have a bit more field of view, which happens. Jared, are less expensive thermal scopes on the horizon? They keep on going down in price. Right now, you can go get a Steiner thermal clip-on with a 640 by 512 imaging core and a 35mm f1 lens, which is quite nicely made, and you can buy it for $3,000, right? So prices keep on coming down, but not super rapidly, but they are. Mr. Alpine, what's the best thermal clip-on if money were no object? What's the diminishing returns like in the thermal world with price versus performance? Whoosh. I mean, there are some thermal ones from like EOTech they built in Greece and a few others here and there that are in the $15,000-$20,000 range that are quite amazing. There is the UTC from Trigicon or the Oasis. There are some really nice ones from Pixels on Target. They're really, really good. A lot depends on what necessarily you're looking for, how far you're shooting, and stuff like that. Where the diminishing returns really kick in really depends on whether you're okay with Chinese thermals or not, right? For general purpose thermal clip-on, right now, it would be very difficult for me to not just go with the Steiner Gen 2 C35. I have one, I really like it. It's small, it's light, has different battery power, very, very good optically. It's very nice. If you are trying to reach far out there without spending $20,000 in a UTC, I just spent some time with the iRay Hybrid 640. And the way they did that, when it's a very, very clever eyepiece, you can use it as a dedicated thermal, or you can use it as a clip-on. And it works quite well in both capacities. And that's a 75mm lens with a 640 by 512 core, and it's a very nice core. iRay, not a Chinese scope as is a Steiner, but they did such a nice job with it that I was quite impressed. And 75mm lens, you have a narrow field of view, you can reach way out there, which really, if you're shooting coyotes and stuff, that would be probably at the top of my list. That's about $7,500. So if you're okay with a Chinese-made thermal, your sweet spot is fairly wide depending on what features you want, and it's between 3,000 and 7,500, something like that. There are some other things coming. They're not going to be super cheap, but they are looking quite good. So we'll see. Once they're out, I'll be able to talk about it more. Jared, what are the best rings for the Delta Striker? They don't make their own rings. Honestly, any good 34mm rings will work with a Striker. I have it in a Badger mount, I think. If I were to be buying a new mount in the current market, overall for precision-oriented stuff, if you want a mount that's kind of the system where you can add other things, etc., I think Area 419 is probably the best I've seen yet. At least it is my favorite. It's not cheap, $300 range, but it is very good. If you are looking for something on a more budget-friendly side, well, that's still an open question, right? So with single-piece mounts, I found that I'm really, really fond of Area 419 and Reptilia, depending what exactly you're looking for. And if you're trying to stay in a couple of $100 range for a single piece mount, for example, one of the Badger uni mounts is worth looking at. If you're gonna add accessories and stuff, it doesn't have any attachment points for that. But as just a relatively simple, robust mount, I've had very good luck with Badger uni mount. There are a couple of others here and there that I've been trying a few less expensive ones. One from Sig, one from Monstrum. They're okay, but yeah, they are a little bit on the flimsier side. So yeah, well, they're $100. I bought a couple to try. I use them where appropriate. They work okay, but I'm not sufficiently impressed to purchase another. I'll keep an eye out of where relatively inexpensive scope mounts are in terms of quality. But for now, if I were to be setting up a pretty nice scope for something requiring some sort of precision, Area 419 is likely to be it. So, oh, Link's here. Hi, Link. General disclaimer: I saw somewhere in my email that Link's alma mater, Discovery Optics, introduced a single piece mount. Haven't seen it. Don't know what it looks like. Haven't had a chance to look. Like I said, I just got home a couple hours ago, 3 hours ago now. All right, we've been at it for about an hour. I am on the East Coast time because since I was in Florida most of the last week, so for me it's midnight. Let's do a couple other questions if there's anything, and then I'm gonna be you and go to sleep. Going once, going twice. What else you got, guys? Let me see. Vortex Pro rings are cheap and they work. Yeah, as far as split rings go, I do like those a good bit. I like Burris's signature rings of all sorts. With Vortex's Pro rings, I think I have one or two sets here. And again, if you just need simple rings, that's not a bad option. If you are looking for something where you'll be adding accessories, stuff like that, yeah, I have not seen anything relatively relatively inexpensive that would be worthwhile. My phone started buzzing. Let's see what happened there. Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. Good. So the Vortex Pro rings are cheap and they work. UTG Pro are actually US made and they work surprisingly well if we're talking split rings. But with the single piece mounts, I found it a little bit more difficult. There were several that were touted to me as pretty good, and they are okay. But with the Monstrum mount, the way they did the cantilever, it's fairly thin piece for them. I can actually bend it a little bit with my hands. With the Sig something 2 mount, so another $100 or so. It's not bad other than having a lot of sharp edges, but the ring halves are a little bit flexy when you mount it, so I would not necessarily use it in a scope. I'm going to be dialing a lot. Red-headed stepchild. Any thoughts on the MDT rings and mounts? So I have not seen MDT rings. I've seen an MDT mount. If I remember correctly, it was very, very well machined. And the only thing I didn't like about it is that they used a single long clamp, which I think from an engineering standpoint is not the best idea. I'm on MDT website to make sure I'm not confusing them with somebody else. Why do I not see the scope mount? Scope bases. All right. So one piece scope on just what I saw. There you go. Yes, that's the one I've seen. It looked very, very well machined. Just for $400, I'd like to get more out of it, right? So the way the MDT mount works, it's $400, and I don't like the single long clamping bar. And for that amount of money, I want a little bit more attention paid to setting up various accessories with it. The MDT mount does not do that. It's a very well made mount, but I think that's more money than they should be asking for it. As far as split scope rings, there's two. Lightweight Premier scope rings. I have not seen those in person. The pictures look, perfectly reasonable. And yeah, from looking at the pictures for the split scope rings, they both look perfectly reasonable, but I have not used them. Okay. Oh yeah, interesting. So MDT does have an accessory scope ring caps, but and a pick rail for it. Yeah, I don't know. For that amount of money, I'd just do Area 419. I think as a system, they're better thought out. Link Chan, what makes Hawkins mount popular in PRS? I have never used the Hawkins mount, so I don't know. As I recall, it was extremely well machined, but if there was anything else about it that was interesting, I don't know. It was somewhere in my list to go take a careful look. Yeah, it looks nice and burly, but I don't know. No experience again. No experience with Hawkins rings, so I don't have any especially strong opinions on this. I'll be honest with you, I did not go through an exercise of trying to evaluate every expensive type of a scope mount. I was looking much more carefully at relatively inexpensive scope mounts because most of the expensive ones I assume would be pretty good. I don't like Spur. I think there are some engineering issues there, but most of the high-end scope mounts work just fine. It's what I want. I want a nice single piece scope mount for her for $150, and that I have not quite found yet. So red hair stepchild, yeah, the long clamp and the kind of thin ring tops and 3 screws, but they look nice. Yeah, it's beautifully machined mount. Everything is smooth, nice. I'm very impressed with MDT products generally. I ended up keeping the triple pull bipod. Really impressed with it. Wonderful products. I've used their different chassis. I think they're very good. But with the mount, I think for that amount of money, they could do more with it, honestly. So let's see. Since Link is here, I saw that Discovery Optics made a scope mount. Let's see what it looks like. DiscoveryRiflescopes.com. Is it a new website? Looks like a nice website. Mounts. Okay. I am looking at very inexpensive mounts that are like $45. 3 individual clamps. Somebody's been paying attention, Link. Actually, based on the pictures, if it's machined well, the Discovery mounts for $40 actually not looking too bad. I can't quite see how they did the clamp, but I think it's a Stanek clamp. Again, they're using a long single piece clamp bar, which is not great. Let me show you what I'm looking at so that you can see. There we go. So this is Discovery Rifle Scope's website. And that's the company that Link works for. So here's the mount. I assume, Link, is this your guy's latest mount? There's an animated video showing the process. Okay. So, ooh, no, that's bad. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys, you fucked it up. If this is the mount, this is not good. Yeah, I've seen a couple Chinese companies do the same exact fuck up. No, this is not gonna hold zero. How interesting. Okay, let's see what about the other mounts. What is this? Is this also a new one or That's been around for a while. Looks broadly similar. Again. Yeah, same problem. This is not going to work well. Sorry, guys. That's a hit and a miss. I've seen this with somebody else not too long ago. And this design comes from a gross misunderstanding of how scope mounts work. Okay. The reason I'm saying this, just so that you guys understand that I'm not just trying to badmouth people for shits and giggles. Let me see. Can I find the right picture? There you go. So see on the bottom of the mount, right here. Okay. You see, so this is the bottom of the mount. See this skeletonizing they did on the bottom? That 20 mm cantilever with the bore grind is the newest. I think is that this one is the newest or the really tall one is the newest? Or this one is the newest where, oh, this is like a rip-off of the Area 419 idea where you bore through the rings to make it perfectly concentric. Heavy duty cantilever. Maybe this one is the newest. Let's see if I... There. So if you see on the bottom of the clamp, so this mount is not going to hold zero consistently, will not return to zero. It will kind of work okay with some rails, mostly won't work with others. You are almost fully giving up one of the primary datum surfaces that you need for a Stanek clamp. So on the bottom there, that's that's the problem. You have a little bit of an engagement surface here on the lug. You are giving it up everywhere else. It'll work a little bit, but not especially well. This scalloping out in the bottom, that's a bad idea. Don't do it. Okay. Other than that, the mount actually looks pretty nice. And but again, there's no, I don't know why people seem to have this weird fascination with putting 6 screws into caps. I cannot quite uh, figure out why that would be a good idea. It's a good sales tactic. People think that 6 is more than 4, so it must work better. If you have sufficiently stiff ring halves, that's probably not ideal. I've seen some quite good shooters. What they do, they take those center pair and just leave them out or don't tighten them. Because if you're trying to tighten evenly 6 rings, you're just opening up yourself for more crap. With reasonably stiff ring halves, 4 screws is more than enough. But we'll see. Ship from Poland, interesting. Now they have a shop in Poland. Go figure. All right, guys. I think on this bit of a commentary, I'm going to wrap up for the day. Thank you guys for sticking with me. I know this one was not planned, but now that I saw what was happening in Syria, I thought it was worth a quick conversation. If there's anything else you want me to cover, you know where to find me, drlordofoptics.com, or put a comment under the video, whatever platform you happen to be on, and I will do my best to address it at a later point. Now it's time for me to go to sleep. Like I said, for me, my body is still in the East Coast time. And I need to go to sleep. Our chat has a comment. Link has a comment. There is way less attention to details in R&D than I would like. That has been the tradition. I don't know if it's changing anytime soon. And that's been one of the problems with many Chinese companies, in that they are so far removed from the markets that they serve that they make mistakes, not so much from lack of attention to details of how to make stuff, but they just don't understand well enough what they need to be making. Anyhow, thank you all and good night.